learned a lot by now about ourselves by working the 4-step inventory sheet and by sitting down with our sponsor so we can see exactly why our life is such an unmanageable mess. We can see in column number 1 that there's lots of people that we have resentment towards, and in our mind what they did to us, and then some of them might be accurate. They did do some horrible things to us. I still have a resentment. I've learned in column number 3 that what is the problem with my resentment is that it leads to all sorts of effect on my emotions, my pride, my emotional security, and etc. I also learned by doing this worksheet by now is that because of all of these checks in my column number 3 that I have a lot of pain in life, a lot of pain, a whole lot of pain. I don't like pain. Nobody likes pain. So I'm going to go run away from the pain. I'm going to escape. And I'm going to do what every porn addict does, and I'm going to go look at pornography. And for just a little bit of time, that's going to make me feel better about myself. But when I come out of that episode of looking at pornography, how am I going to feel then? Like we learned in the vicious cycle, I'll probably be full of guilt and shame, and I'll make a resolution not to do this again. But something's going to happen between that resolution and the next time I develop all sorts of restlessness, irritability, and discontent, resentment, and fears that are going to cause me to act out again, and then I'm on that vicious cycle. It seems hopeless. Is there anything we can do about it? Column number 4 comes along and it says, let me look at what David C's character defects are. And I start to learn about my selfishness and my dishonesty, that I don't really look at the whole picture, my scared of loss, my self-seeking, my need to control, and being an inconsiderate person. This is part of my personality. That's why the program invites me to have a personality change. That's what the spiritual experience is all about. So what can I do now? I can see that looking at life through my lenses, my dark colored lenses of my egotistical self-centeredness and needing to control my ego, is looking at everybody and every situation and filling me full of pain. Is there any hope for me? Yes, the answer is clearly yes. We do in column number 4, when we sit down with our sponsor, something that is a complete miracle. Seemingly it's a miracle. We learn to do what's known as the turnaround. In the turnaround, we'll sit down with our sponsor, and if you see there were some blanks left in between each of our character defects, that blank is there for us to put the opposite of it. It's called the turnaround. And let's see what happens now. What is the turnaround of selfishness? Well, selflessness, that's pretty easy. What's the turnaround of dishonesty? Honesty. If I can look at life from an honest perspective, if I can see the whole picture, will that change my resentment? The third item is I'm a taker. I'm self-seeking. The turnaround on that is to be humble. What's the turnaround for needing to control? Letting go. What's the turnaround for scared of loss? Fearlessness. What's the turnaround for being inconsiderate? It's simple, being considerate. I hope you notice that within this is the mission statement. You know, that we've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with God, and to discover the obstacles in our path. That's what column 4 is, the obstacles in my path. The new attitude and the new relationship with God comes from my doing the turnaround. If I start to look at the world, and where's the world? The world is in column 1 and column number 2. It's going to change the way I feel about what's going on in column number 1 and column number 2. Based on our resentment sheet so far, if I look at Mr. Brown and seemingly his attention towards my wife, if I look at that situation through the lens of selflessness, well, you know, it doesn't have to affect me this way. If I look through the lens of honesty, in other words, I'll look at the whole picture, how much of this resentment that I have is just my imagination? How much of my anticipation that my wife is even interested in Mr. Brown is my imagination? It's my dishonesty. And my humility, if I look at through life and this situation with Mr. Brown through a sense of humility, I'm learning that, this isn't absolutely something that I need to really be worried about or be angry about. If I can look at life through a sense of fearlessness and being more considerate, I just won't have the same degree of anger, resentment towards Mr. Brown and his attention towards my wife, no matter how much of that I make up or not. And look what's going to happen. When I start looking at life through these lenses, what happens to the checks in this column number 3? Maybe it won't affect my relationships. Maybe it won't affect my material security or my emotional security. And if I go and I do that in all of these resentments across the page, I might reduce 50% of the checks in column number 3. Going back to the analogy we discussed about the pot of water that it boils at 100 degrees centigrade, all I have to do is get below 100 degrees centigrade and it stops boiling. Boiling is acting out. Boiling, the pot of water is powerless over 100 degrees centigrade, and it acts out by boiling. For me, as an addict, my boiling temperature is also 100 degrees of checks in column number 3. My job isn't to eliminate every single check in column number 3. My hope, and I believe you will find that this will occur for you as well, when we shift the way we look at life through these new lenses, this new attitude, life being column 1 and column number 2, the checks in column number 3 are going to be lessened. And when there are less checks in column number 3, guess what? My pain level goes down. And if it doesn't cross my threshold of pain, I don't act out. Wow. Wow. That's been my whole goal all along, is not to act out. You know why? It's because I don't have to act out. I have a solid character. I have character attributes now. I have a divine way of looking at life because my higher power is also selfless. My higher power is generous, giving, loving. When I adopt that same approach towards life, then I'm free. All right? That's the resentment sheet. We would look the same way at these other 2 sheets. The fear sheet is the next one. And then there's the sex conduct sheet and the sex harm sheet. The fearlessness sheet is done the same way. Just remember that resentments are everything from the past, things that didn't go my way. The fear sheet is things that I think won't go my way. That's what the fear sheet is all about. But the process is still the same. We have situations, we have people or institutions and situations in column number 1 and column number 2. For example, on this particular sheet, I have a fear that my wife will leave me. What's the cause? She keeps catching me looking at porn. Number 2 here, I have a fear that I will lose my kids. Why? Because I fear that my wife will divorce me and take them. How does that make me feel? That's what column number 3 is all about. If you notice, there's a whole bunch of checks here. Why do I have these checks here? Because of column number 4. What's my part in this fear? My selfishness and my dishonesty and my need to control. If I start to look at these situations, what I'm fearful of, through the bright colored lenses, if I start to look at what's going on in column number 1 and column number 2 with a humility and fearlessness and honesty, I guarantee you there will be less checks in column number 3. And when there's less checks in column number 3 on the fear sheet, just like we learned on the resentment sheet, my pain goes down and I don't act out. Now, there's a formula, a mathematical formula, if you like math, which when I live life like this, guess what? Column 1 plus column number 2 equals column number 3. This person here and what they did to me, when I add these up, cause me to feel this lousy way. And when I feel this way, I act out. That's what most people think that life is. But once I am introduced by my sponsor to column number 4, and I see that I have a part in my resentments and I have a part in my fear, My new freedom is by changing that mathematical formula to 1 plus 2 in brackets times 4 equals 3. That may be a little bit complicated, and your sponsor can explain it to you better. Essentially, 1 plus 2 in brackets times 4 equals 3, which means that 4 is the multiplier. 4 is the multiplier. Why? Because it's the lens at which I look at life. I'm multiplying, magnifying my resentments and my fears when I live inside my character defects. Similarly, when I look at life through my character attributes, when I ask God to take away my character defects and I replace them with humility, fearlessness, and honesty, that's another lens, that's another multiplier. And when that happens, the equation means that there's less checks in column number 3, and there's less pain, and there's less acting out. Okay, let's see what this means, what's the implication there is for this next sheet, the last sheet, which is my sex conduct sheet and my sex harms. Remember, we said that on the resentment sheet that things in the past that I don't think will go my way are resentments. Things in the future that I don't think will go my way create fears. What happens is that I am powerless. I feel like life is out of control. And what am I going to do? What is every addict going to do? We're going to go to our drug of choice. And that means that it is something that I can control. I've lost control of everything in every situation in column 1 and 2 on my resentment sheet and my fear sheet. That's why I act out. That's why I fill up this sheet with sex harms. Why? Is because of the first sheet and the second sheet. And not to make it too complicated, but now we can go to a mathematical formula that says 1 plus 2 does equal 3. 1 is the resentment sheet. 2 is the fear sheet. When I add those all up, I have a lot of sex conduct. I have a lot of sex harms. I may be harming my children. I may be harming my wife. I may be harming my boss, my parents, all because of my sex conduct. And you may say, how can your sex conduct harm your parents? I mean, you're not having sex with your parents. You're not looking at pornography of your parents. It doesn't make sense. My boss, there's no sex involved with my boss, seemingly. But when we take a closer examination of exactly how my sex conduct through pornography is affecting people other than my wife who I have, and I know now, who I have genuinely betrayed her, I've also betrayed my children, my boss, my friends. Why? Because I'm not paying them attention. I'm not arriving on time. It affects my boss. I'm harming my boss because I stayed up so late last night looking at pornography that I can't get up in the morning, so I'm arriving late at the office. Are there times that when I'm in the office and I'm looking at pornography? My sex conduct also affects my boss and other people around me. My friends, through the 4-step inventory, we're shedding a lot of light on ourselves, on our makeup, on our character defects, but there's hope. By making the switches, by doing the turnaround in my column number 4, by having a new attitude and a new relationship with my God, then I can be free. Then the pain level will be lower and I don't have to act out. I don't have to look at pornography anymore.